Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and this is going to be a brief little novel review for Book 3 in David Mack's Star Trek The Next Generation trilogy, Cold Equations, The Body Electric. The Body Electric picks up 6 months after Book 1, The Persistence of Memory, and a little under 5 years after the last Next Generation film, Star Trek Nemesis. Let me take a moment to warn the intrepid listener, as I've done in my previous novel reviews, that from this point onward there will be some spoilery elements in the discussion of this novel, directly referencing rather large chunks of the plot of the overall novel trilogy. If you wish to avoid this, please refrain from continuing with this review. Otherwise, I'll assume you're caught up, and on we go. The Body Electric is at once bold in its conception and massive in its scope. It deals from the outset with a planet-sized, super-powerful machine bending and shaping space to its will to hurtle entire systems of planets into a supermassive black hole. Bearing witness to this is Wesley Crusher, who is now, as the synopsis on the reverse of the novel states, a full-fledged traveler. Though Wes's powers are great, they nor the combined powers of the entirety of the Travelers' Intergalactic Fellowship are great enough to do anything about it. And as they all collectively cut and run, it's left to Wes to find someone, anyone, who'll help save the galaxy. The book also continues on with the overarching thread of Data's having been resurrected by his father, Dr. Noonien Sung, in one final sacrificial act, after he too had just managed to escape death in the first chapter of this novel trilogy. Data's new lease on life is not without his own purpose, one very closely mirroring that of his father's before him, the resurrection of his one and only child, Lal. But Data knows this to be beyond his, and by extension even his father's, own abilities. However, hope still exists, in the form of an immortal human being known by many names throughout many hundreds of centuries that at one time worked in partnership with Sung. This man, who was previously encountered by James T. Kirk's Enterprise in the third season original series episode Requiem for Methuselah, and who is currently known as Acheron, carries with him the knowledge vast enough to revive a positronic brain after its having suffered a complete and total cascade failure, thus leading Data to believe that, if he can find Acheron and persuade him to help in his endeavor, reviving Lal is actually a foreseeable possibility. The trouble is, Acheron is being held captive by a roving band of essentially rebel sentient AIs in the hope that they too can attain such knowledge. Now, as one might expect, the problem of the massive galaxy-killing machine is one that leads Wesley back to his former friends and colleagues of the USS Enterprise, but not before a brief guest appearance by a certain so-called omnipotent being, just to assure that he can be of no help in the matter. And what follows is the deftly guided, ultimately interconnected mutual efforts of Data, Wes, and the crew of the Enterprise in ascertaining the reasoning behind the machine's actions, as well as whatever resolution they can reach in stopping it. Now, I'll admit, in the early going of The Body Electric, I couldn't initially fathom just how the seemingly mutually exclusive arcs of Data's versus Wesley's and the Enterprise's would eventually come together. But I had a moment not unlike an epiphany once Data makes contact with the group of sentient AIs holding Acheron that spelled out for me the likeliest reasoning that would lead these two avenues to a virtual bridging, and have to say that author David Mack delivered on it and then some. What was most impressive to me was that herein was probably the first I wasn't in any way annoyed by the presence of Wesley Crusher. Yes, I'm one of those folks that, short of maybe 1 or 2 episodes of which he was the center focus, largely could do without him. Dare I say, though, by the end of this piece, I can almost see an entire series, television, novel, or otherwise, entirely surrounding him and his abilities, traveling beyond the space-time continuum through multiverses. It could be quite a saga in and of itself. Well represented too in the novel and set against the unfolding catastrophe that speaks largely to the metaphysical, or if you will, the metatechnical, is humanity itself, as evidenced in one aspect by the very basic and relatable rituals that come with dating. This sequence, largely featuring one of the breakout characters from the second novel in the trilogy, the half-Vulcan, half-human Teresa Chen, and her perhaps poorly laid eyes on the fully Vulcan Assistant Chief Engineer Torek. The exploration into their pairing began, to my estimation, with a somewhat mild level of superficiality, but was able to pay itself off satisfyingly in the end, each being given the opportunity to fulfill an arc. And she was not without her time to shine in this tome as well, when it mattered most. And in another aspect, that innate sense of family and kin, mutually represented by Data and Acheron and their respective children, as well as by Wesley, his mother, and the son that is hers and Picard's. We see each of the men is willing to go to the ends of the cosmos, to the ends of even themselves, if it's necessary in attaining their goals. Adding complexity to their relationship is Rhea McAdams, Acheron's holotronically gifted android daughter, who serves too as the love of Data's life. It should not go without saying, too, that there was a character, a member of the group of sentient AIs who end up holding all three captive, Acheron, Data, and Rhea McAdams, who has a substantial, if completely surprising, arc throughout the Body Electric. But it's one that reminds me, as a fan of David Mack's written work, just why that is the case. Now, does the Body Electric fulfill by the end and by its design all aspects of the Cold Equations trilogy set up in the persistence of memory and carried through Silent Weapons? In answer to that, I'd have to say largely yes. The weightiness of the planet-slaying machine never once blanches throughout the course of the story, and even at times manages to ramp up to unexpected levels. The different facets of each of the novels were guided by one overarching thread and kept that solid to its core at all times. The risks are tremendous and palpable when they're taken. There is innate tension, and when relief can be had, it is done with a sense of subdued relish. If a novel, or in this case a novel trilogy, can leave me by the end entertained, satisfied, and what's more, thoroughly glad to have experienced it, I can think of no better way to be left by its conclusion. And that is exactly where I am by the end of Cold Equations, The Body Electric. And so I can only imagine what the next chapter of the crew of the 24th Century's Enterprise will behold, and what author will have the honor of picking up where the Body Electric leaves off, and by degrees I'm eager and very excited to find out. For now, that'll be it for me on this one. I highly recommend picking up the Cold Equations trilogy, and would love to hear from you guys in the comments below subsequently what some of your favorite Star Trek related characters or stories or authors are. And otherwise, I'll catch you all later. Peace.